morning. It's very good to see you, and I'm very grateful to Trey, to David, to everyone that's part of this organization that invited me. I'm very grateful to participate. I'm joined this morning by my partner, Dorothy Stone, also, who is a native Vermonter and a lifetime practitioner in the holistic arts. She has a practice in Williston, Vermont. She's going to be working with me to help demonstrate some of the sound instruments, so please give her a welcome also. What I said was I just needed to restart the PowerPoint. Thank you. So I've been working in the field of sound and therapeutic sound since the 1970s. I had some fairly profound experiences with it and became a flute maker early in my life. I studied the type of flute that I was introduced to was the bamboo flute of Eastern cultures. And I began studying the music of Eastern cultures and then Native America and other cultures as well, and started learning the meditative and therapeutic qualities of sound. I'd like to speak to you about the nature of sound as a nourishing tool to utilize in our life. One thing to understand is that sound is with us all the time. Indeed, sound is one of the principal elements of the universe. Science understands this. They understand the vibrational nature of life and are studying the nature of sound and its impact on matter and on our health and wellness. And indeed, the images you see not showing up, but the images you see that are these interesting geometric patterns arise from the new science of cymatics, and most of them come from my friend Eric Larson, who is a premier researcher in the field of cymatics, or the nature of the impact of waveform on matter. So sound is part of our life. It's everywhere. We are encompassed by it. And one thing that I want to bring to our attention is the sound environment that we engage in. What is your sound environment at home, at work, in the streets, and how does it impact us? Science is showing very effectively that ongoing exposure to toxic sound is just as impactful in a negative way to our well-being as toxic food or water or air. We're very concerned about our environmental resources, but as a public at large, we're not that aware of the impact of sound upon us. And our neurology is constantly reacting to sound. One thing about therapeutic sound work is that it doesn't tend to use musical arrangements that the mind is familiar with. And when we utilize non-recognizable sounds, the cognitive mind tends to go into relaxation, and it stimulates deeper response within our neurology. And indeed, our auditory cortex and our visual cortex actually create our whole reference of time and space. So I seem to have missed the slide there. Don't know where it is, so I'll forget it for now. Forgive me. Through the visual and auditory cortex, we create our perceptual awareness of time and space. So fundamentally, our reality is based on light and sound. And again, this is through the auditory and visual cortexes that this happens. And this is part of why sound therapy works very well, because again, it bypasses our normal cognitive function. It enters the auditory cortex more directly without filtering of the mind, and allows our neurology to respond in coherent ways if the sounds are coherent, and I'll explain all of that as we go. But I'd like to begin with just a simple practice to help bring you into this place, into the present state. That's one of the things that I mean when I talk about sound, is how we perceive time and it's related to our spatial perception also. When we can relax into coherent sound, our neurology tends to relax. It brings us into a present state. Then we're better able to be receptive listeners and learn and understand from each other more. So we're going to begin with a simple sound practice. We're going to use 2 crystal bowls, which are modern inventions that arise from the crystal industry. In the early days of computer technology, pure silicon crystal bowls were fused in order to grow our silicon chips and used in our phones and computers and so forth. It turns out that they have a very pure, coherent sound. And there's a great deal of research around the nature of the bowls and how it can improve our relaxation and response, utilized in oncology and other medical interventions and so forth. But we're just going to do a simple practice with these bowls. We ask you to just relax and feel into how you experience it within your own body awareness. There's nothing particular beyond that that you need to do. If you're someone who does meditate, you might enter into a coherent state or a mindful state within your heart or your brain centers. And just rest there. Just rest in a state of coherence. Coherence fundamentally means positive emotional states. So just a state of peacefulness, a state of unconditional love, a state of compassion, a state of openness. Something like this can help enhance the effect of just listening to the bowls. And Dorothy and I will begin toning also, which are, for lack of a better definition and much time to explain it, are random syllabic sounds. And just rest into the sounds. I hope you enjoy it. Follow the rhythm of your breath. Allow your breath to soften. appears the reason I can't find the slides is because they were not saved here, so forgive me. Fundamentally, neurology has found that our response to coherent sounds is an inherently relaxing state, that we can even enter that state of what's medically known as homeostasis, which is the balanced sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system place in which our body can generate self-healing. It is one mechanism that science recognizes very well, and one reason that so many holistic therapeutic treatments or modalities are effective, because they bring the body into deep relaxed states or into that state of homeostasis. It allows the body to self-generate. In our own work, we work more from a psychotherapeutic nature of working with the emotional body and with mental belief systems and other things. But just relaxing into the sound can be very beneficial, and there's tremendous reports of that. And not just with sound therapy, but also with different methodologies of therapeutic music. The American Music Therapy Association is a national association, an international association really, that is based in very specified work with music for relaxation and wellness, with a great deal of documentation that shows our body's response to what we perceive as coherent music. What you see or what you hear as coherent may be different than what I hear. Our own response is very important to it. So some people are very deeply moved just by the sound of bowls, and occasionally there might be somebody who just doesn't like that particular tonal quality. And the same is true with different music as well. Music in therapy is used in modern medicine in a wide range of ways. It was over 10 years ago that I was reading an article by a heart surgeon who said that we're at the point of understanding that a surgeon would be negligent to not include music before, during, and after surgery, because it is shown so effectively to improve the recovery rate. And I've worked with anesthesiologists also, who have data showing that less medicine is needed with working with sound and music. So there's a lot of great science showing us how this works. The slide that I was looking for was a beautiful slide from NASA of the cosmos. And modern science is showing us about the quality and quantity of information available through sound imprints. Again, sound is one of the fundamental elements of life. And modern astrophysicists are telling us that in more recent years, they're listening to the sound of stars. And over about the past decade, the information that they've gathered from the sound of stars is more information than they have collectively gathered from the entire light and radio wave spectrum, the electromagnetic wave spectrum of stars, how they've gathered all the information since the beginning of study of stars. The information they've gathered through the sound of stars has more information to help them with understanding of the nature of the elemental content of the stars and so much more. So more and more science is seeing the importance of sound and utilizing it. The US government is involved in research right now to help develop technology that can diagnose or cure disease through sound. And there have been effective tools working for well over 50 years, such as the Cyma machines, which began with work in England and has moved to the US now. And that is, in part, is the work by these Cyma Scopes, which show these wonderful effects of sound on the body. And I'm going to move through just a little bit to show you what the Cyma Scope is and see some of the other sound imprints that are being shown through this work. So if you look at the bottom right-hand slide, you'll see a modern Cyma Scope invented through the work of John Reed from England and Eric Larson from the US. Eric used to live right here in Vermont, and he would come to our sound training programs and actually let us use this machine to tone into it, to use our own voices and see the soundscapes that came up. These images to the left, the gold and blue image, are waveforms of how sound imprints, in this case, viscous liquid. And the way that this works is that a pattern is created through what's fundamentally a drum head in this Cyma Scope machine, and light is shown across it, so it shows the height of the waveform, and that's what you're seeing is the heightened waves of the sound imprints. But when you look at these different patterns that come from sound, you can see how different information is available through the different sound glyphs that arise. And this is the type of way of understanding how science is perceiving information within the sound field of stars as one example. When I was a young man in science class, I saw a sound wave that looked like this on an oscilloscope. And that's what I thought sound was, but it is not two-dimensional. And the other image in this slide can give you a better idea of what's actually happening, that every sound generated is really going out multidimensionally, at least into 3 dimensions. And if you were to take a slice of that sound imprint, of that sound wave, then that's what you're seeing on the Cyma Scope with these images. And you can see it in the young man that's speaking there, that's more globally the sound is coming out. You take a slice of that, and that's how these patterns are developed. These patterns mimic many patterns seen in nature. The work of Alexander Ladewasser in Germany is showing sound patterns that mimic explicit patterns in nature, such as the one in the top middle that looks like a tortoise shell, or the one in the bottom right that looks like a milk thistle blossom and has the same geometric patternings, or the one on the bottom left that looks like a cactus bloom. And these geometric patterns are beneficial to understand because nature arises in certain proportional relationships. And science's math is based upon these proportional relationships. It comes to us from ancient Greece, and I apologize. I thought I knew how this slide presentation was arranged, and apparently I bypassed those slides that I wanted now. So throughout all of nature, there are these fundamental proportions that arise in geometric relationships. In math and science, these are known as the Platonic Solids. This comes from the work of the Greek master Plato, but he learned from earlier Greek masters and from Egyptian masters of what then was called the sacred geometries. And they understand that these proportional relationships are exhibited throughout all spectrums of life. Science now confirms this, that in nature, from cellular activity, from atomic structures up to galactic spiraling, that there are these same proportional relationships that occur. We know of them as the phi relationship, the golden mean, and other terminology at this time, but it's been known throughout the full spectrum of life. To give you an understanding of this, look at the red rose pattern in the top middle of this, and it looks like a child's Etch-a-Sketch drawing. But what it actually is a computer-generated image of what you would see if you could hold a piece of paper up in the sky, look at Venus in the night sky, and pencil tracking her course in the night sky for 8 years. This is what it looks like. The other image is the moon Chiron from one of the other moons of Jupiter, I believe. But all of our solar system obeys these same relationships of harmonic patterning. So that's important because, again, I'm going to go back to look this way for a moment because I'm not finding these slides where I exactly want them. So our musical system is based on these same harmonic patterns. And what you're seeing is different pitches, different musical tones that create harmonic patternings. For instance, these patterns are the third and the fifth, and I'm going to let Dorothy just tone them for you with this set of what we call the rainbow bowls here in front of us. This is an 8-bowl set for the 8 primary tones of our musical system, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Starting with the low C, moving to the E, and then to the G, and actually going up to the high C. And does that sound reasonably nice to you, or do you have a not a nice reaction to that? Most of us inherently, we hear these, and our body inherently goes, ah. This is the foundation of our musical structure based on this harmonic patterning that is reflected through all life.
Is this the same as Fibonacci?
Yes. The Fibonacci series is a reflection of what you're listening to. This is an audible Fibonacci sequence, okay? So again, I said the golden mean, the phi ratios, those are all related to what, this is the musical interpretation of the natural geometries that you see throughout all nature that are the fundamental principles of math and science through the Platonic Solids. So when we hear these sounds, our body tends to go, ah. We tend to open and relax. I say it's the musical equivalent of listening to a rose. What do you do when you smell a rose? Just imagine it right now. Do you go, ah? Or does your body inherently open and relax? And it's an inherent neurological response. This happens with sound also. This is known by great musicians who use these musical chords for this very reason. They call the C and G, for instance, in this particular model, play the C and G if you would, this is known as the perfect fifth because this is the first sequence of musical notes as they arise in the way that our musical structure was created. It's called the perfect fifth, and this is used by master composers throughout all time as a foundation to music because it is that inherent chord that has this relaxation response that brings us into a felt sense of beauty or wellness, also oneness, because with sound, the mental constructs that we build, again, tend to melt away. When we use coherent sound, it tends to bypass, neurologically, it bypasses the frontal lobes and enters the auditory cortex as well as the visual or spatial, the visual cortex in the back of the brain that equates to our perception of space. So it alters our perception of space and time. It brings us into the present moment. So when we're in the present moment, we're more available. We're more able to listen and receive. We're more able to enter what in another cultural perspective would be called our wisdom body, a way of making clear choices, and then clear actions arise from that. Listening is a skill which I suspect many of us in this room have. I feel like I'm hearing you listen right now. By listening, we absorb the nutrition of sound. And this phrase is something that comes from the work of Dr. Alfred Tomatis, who has developed a profound sound therapeutic model that helps bring us into deep states of wellness, and there's much research around his methodology. He was an audiologist in France who did a lot of work there. One of the first big stories of his life was when he was invited to a monastery where the monks just were not happy any longer. Nobody could figure out why. And he went into research, and he was talking with the monks and so forth, and found out that the new leader in the monastery had asked them to stop doing their ancient Gregorian chants. And they were unhappy. And they were showing symptoms of illness and stress in their lives. He said, why don't you reintroduce the chanting? Well, the church is trying to change and not do this anymore and so forth. Oh, just try it. and he did, and this deep wellness came almost instantly back to the monks from engaging in the rich harmonies of their ancient methods of chanting. So I wanted to talk about these harmonics in part because there's a lot of science also about the nature of coherence, and if you're not aware, our emotional states are easily measured by science these days, and each has a different waveform. So if we're feeling frustration or unconditional love, someone with the right measurable instruments can tell us what our current emotional states are. And there's a lot of work through the people such as at Heart Math Institute in California, and as well as the Music and Medicine Society, that show that holding coherent states help improve our wellness in measurable ways. It improves our IgA immune response. It improves our heart rate, our respiratory rate, our blood pressure, et cetera. In measurable ways, by resting in coherence, we improve our health. Coherence, again, is fundamentally the positive feeling states. So we can choose any one. Gratitude and appreciation is used a great deal in the research. Gratitude, appreciation, unconditional love, a felt sense of peace, joy, just openness or spaciousness is another method of entering the state of coherence. And the incoherent emotions, the frustration, anger, negative feeling states, also deplete those measurable wellness factors in the research. So just holding good feeling states improves our wellness in measurable ways. Holding incoherent states weakens our wellness in measurable ways. When we add guided imagery practices to the coherent states, it shows that it improves them even more so. And when we add what's called, what in the research is called designed music, which fundamentally we call intentional music, it improves the wellness even more. So coherent states, guided imagery, and intentional music improve our wellness states in measurable ways by science at places like the Heart Math Institute. You can see their work at heartmath.org. Most of these images are brought up there. They show that listening to coherent music versus incoherent music, they might use grunge music or something like that, they show the difference in what we're listening to. So I began by asking you, what is your sound environment? Is it one that creates a state of wellness, or is it one that creates a state of stress and chaos? It's something to pay attention to because our sound environment is something that we can easily alter. Just putting on some pleasant music or something. I know that some of us may not have that option because of our workplace or something else. But wherever possible, by looking for places to create a coherent sound, it will impact our states of wellness measurably. So the designer music and intentional music fundamentally both mean music or sounds that are intended to create a state of wellness. That's fundamentally what the definition is. So more and more musicians are understanding this and learning how to intentionally promote states of wellness through their music. And this really has always happened with musicians, but they haven't been as cognizant of it. They are more and more aware. The science is coming more and more forward. But musicians throughout time have understood this and use these fundamental harmonic chordal structures to help. So I didn't pay close attention to when I started, but I believe my time is about up. Do I have 5 more minutes? Okay, so we're going to do a little wellness practice. And I'm just going to have you come back into the feeling states within your heart center. And the heart generates about 44 times larger of an electromagnetic field than the brain does. Your emotions drive your wellness. That's something else coming from science and math. Just come into the heart center. Just come into your heart in the center of the chest and just rest in a coherent state. Try to build a feeling sense of a positive feeling state such as appreciation or gratitude, unconditional love, or peacefulness or openness, and just rest in that place.
Thank you.